Hello? Hello? Can people hear me? I can hear you. Thank you. Three minutes. Good. But will you let me know when it begins? Yeah. Okay. Can I ask one question? Could there be questions afterwards or during the presentation? Good. Perfect. All right. So welcome to to this webinar, which will be related to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused a lot of new ways of doing cyber threat attacks. My name is Jan Kaastrup, and I am the CTO in the security company called CSIS. Just to give you a little background about what we do, we are back from 2003. Our main focus is on the financial sector and the critical infrastructure sector. We do a lot of threat intelligence research and publish a lot of reports and participate in botnet takedowns, working very closely with law enforcement. And one of the things we have been doing since the crisis started was to cover all the different type of attacks we have seen from criminals and basically updated our customers about what to do. But this is not it's not a presentation about CSIS, so I will get to it. The agenda for today is that I will give some highlights of the threats we have seen in the light of COVID-19. I will not present everything I've seen. And there's a lot of noise on the channel. I think it disappeared. Is it me that experienced the noise? I am a moderator to take over here, but my mic is being flooded. Okay, that helped. So let me continue. So I will cover the highlights from the COVID-19 crisis. I will only take out some of the cases because there is a lot. I will then also walk you through an incident response case that we've been involved in that was due to COVID-19 and has very interesting perspectives and a lot of takeaways. And then I will share some of our contribution to the society, what we have chosen to give away for free in this period. So it might be something that you want to use. So I just want to give you an insight into that. And then at the end, and I'm hoping to do it within 40 minutes, we will have questions to everyone that is on the call. So let me start with the highlights. And first of all, let me also just state the fact that it is not because we have seen a lot of new motivations behind the attacks. It's nothing kind of new that has arisen during the attack. What we have seen is a increase in attacks from criminals because they are luring on the COVID-19 pandemic. So they're using that as a theme for their attacks. So that is just to be clear about that. So we're still seeing state-sponsored attacks, but just increased. We are still seeing ransomware attack, but increased and so on. So it's more about the way they are carried out and why they are more successful, I think. So the first slide I want to show you here is the registration of domain names, which has a COVID-19 name in it. We have seen a lot of new domain names being created. Of course, a lot of them are legit and is used for a purpose that is legit, but a lot of them is also non-legit. So they are being used to, be better at being reached when you do Google searching, because it's so easy to get your domain name with COVID-19 up on the searching results page. Some of the domain names are used in command control server traffic, so they don't light up when you are monitoring your communication going out. Some of them is being used for new websites that is distributing malicious Android apps or a new antivirus software, which is a virus, of course, but I'll get back to that. So a spike there. Another thing is that based on some of the statistics from the Microsoft systems, a lot of the malware related to COVID-19 is very well distributed in basically the whole world. The only one that is not hit seems to be Greenland. And that basically shows that this pandemic is something that is targeting everyone out there. The other thing, and this is from Shodan Statistics, Shodan is a system or service which is almost monitoring most of the internet for services that is available, including header information from the versions of software they're running. And just by looking for a remote desktop, which I guess you all know what it is, but it's basically a remote protocol to kind of remotely monitor or remotely control your computer. And that service has basically exploded, being available for everyone on the internet. So if you had a username and password, you can log in to these services. And because a lot of people is working from home during COVID-19, a lot of companies have put up these servers to make it possible for the employee to work from home. Unfortunately, a lot of attacks against these remote desktop services has happened, and one of the outcome, I'm not sure it's only related to COVID-19, but at least what we have seen is a couple of criminals that is putting backdoors on servers with remote desktop, and they are trading that on the Darknet, so you can buy your access into a lot of companies with the remote desktop protocol. Then, because of, again, COVID-19 and the need of doing WebEx like we are doing right now, the criminals, of course, and non-criminals have focused on the different conference software out there. And the most popular one seems to be Zoom. And Zoom have had several kind of vulnerabilities associated to it. A lot of them you could actually mitigate with common sense in the configuration. But then at a point during the COVID-19 crisis, a guy was publishing this one on the Darknet that he had found a new exploit for Zoom that would give remote execution, and he was selling that for $500,000. I was about to give a conference on Zoom at the very same day that this was published, and we had to kind of cancel it because we were using the Zoom conference software. We realized afterwards that it was a fake profile, and it hasn't been confirmed that there was actually a Zoom exploit. Regardless, there's no doubt that that there is a lot of exploits out there and a lot of people focusing on finding vulnerabilities in this software and also in the software that we are using today. Then we see, and this is probably the most increase of attacks we see, and that is spear phishing email that is layering on the COVID-19 theme. This is a really, really awful example seen from a criminal perspective, because what you can see in this spear phishing email is that they are targeting the Danish company Maersk, and they are doing shipping. So that is very likely that some of the shipment they are doing is cancelled or delayed due to COVID-19 attack. If you click on the attachment, you will be infected with a remote administration tool, RAT, which I'll get a bit back to what it can do. But what you'll see in this specific attack is that there's formatting mistakes, and that is not very often we see that. The email, the spear phishing email that is sent out is typical, very, very well carried out and has no mistakes. But in this specific case, we found a lot of formatting issues in the spear phishing email. Then what we also seen is that the criminals, not only are they focusing on the COVID-19 theme, but they are also using high-profile email accounts to send out the emails. And what do I mean with high-profile email accounts? Well, in the world of email that is being sent out, we have something that is called SPF and DMARC, which if you have enabled that for your email domain, it's not possible for other people to send email that looks like it is sent from you. And I can promise you that state.gov, they have protected their email domain with both DMARC and SPF. So it shouldn't be possible to spoof their email address. And that is why we know that this specific account was actually compromised, because a spear phishing email was sent from this account, and that can only be done if you have the username, if you have access to that email account and can send out the email. And in this specific case, they were shipping out or pushing out the Remco remote administration tool, which gives again full access to the machine. You can use it as a jump station. You can harvest the passwords, and it was hidden as an ISO file, the attachment, with very, very few AV detections in the initial state. So this is a good example of email accounts. That's also why we see so many phishing attacks taking place, where the criminals, they try to get access to email accounts because they can use them for many purposes. And one of them is actually to redistribute their malware and make it look like a legit email because it comes from someone you maybe trust, or at least someone that might want to send you an email. The other kind of emails, spear phishing attacks we see is where the criminals, they're spoofing the email, and this one is an example for the World Health Organization. And the reason why this attack is possible is because they haven't protected their email domain with DMARC, SPF, and DKIM. That is something, of course, they should do, and especially this organization, you would expect, or a lot of people would expect, to get email from them. Again, coronavirus travel recommendations, it's a very, very common and very relevant subject, and sent from info@who.org. There's no way for normal people to understand that this is actually phishing. This rat specifically was coatic, the coatic rat, but again, it's the same thing. It's full access to your machine. They sell off the access to other criminals. They can use it to go further into the network, and they can fully control the machine, basically. I'm showing sometimes these indicators. So this one is an indicator for the IP address where the malicious document was hosted. And I'm showing these indicators. We also are giving out the indicators for the command control servers. But the reason why I'm doing this is because at the end of my presentation, I will basically give you access to all these information if it's something that you find interesting. So if you look up who.org and you look for their domain is being protected, it is not, and somebody should really help them to get this set up. And then we have the world's best antivirus out there. It is called Corona Antivirus. I mean, isn't that just hilarious? They have also registered the antivirus-COVID-19.site domain. So everything here looks pretty legit, I'd say. It's free Corona Antivirus. So it's not because they try to steal your credit cards. It's basically because when you install it, you get infected with something called Blacknet rat, again in the same category. And again, I'm sharing some of the CNC traffic you can see below. So it's communicating over HTTPS, and there you have you can basically control with commands. So if you get infected, everything is communicated to the CNC server, is done with HTTPS communication. This is from their backend panel, so you can see how many infections they have and what kind of capabilities this rat have. And then, as I said, the Office 365, Microsoft Office 365 is the most used cloud email provider out there. It has really increased in volume of customers that is become customers with Office 365. And that is especially due to there's a lot of nice security features, but most important is it's something that is very easy to set up and that works very well, and it's out in the cloud. Of course, that has a lot of security concerns. There have been a lot of things reported to Microsoft from us regarding their Office 365 webmail solution. And I can mention a couple, which is not the COVID-19 theme directly, but One of them being the two-factor authentication that they call conditional access. In a very long time, you could bypass that for any account if you were using a unsupported protocol like Firefox on a Mac. If you did that and you had the username and password, even though conditional access was enabled, which means you need two-factor authentication, if you're using Firefox on a Mac, you were sending the request, it was just being forwarded to your internal Active Directory, and that wouldn't support two-factor authentication, so you could log in just with one-factor authentication. That has been fixed now, but it's a setting you need to enable. But all these different things we have realized or found from the Microsoft Office 365 platform, I think some of them is also why the phishing is so enormous as it is against them. And taking into consideration what you can use an email account for, I sometimes have a slide that shows what is the value of an email account. How many money can you earn on just compromising one email account? And that is enormous. There was an example not that long time ago where a guy from the White House, he was the PR in the White House, and his email account was compromised, or his Twitter account was compromised. That was the same email. That was the same username and password. So his Twitter account was compromised, and he was posting that the White House was hit by a bomb, and Obama, he was injured. And Nasdaq basically just dropped totally. Everybody that was doing stock exchange would really earn a lot of money if they knew what would happen when that message came out. In the more IT security world, we see the accounts, as I said, being used to distribute malware to people. So the email sender looks more legit. But especially during the last couple of years, what the criminals are using it for is related to what we call BEC attack or CEO fraud. And that is something that has increased extremely. So what is that? Well, it's basically someone that is redirecting invoice account numbers. So imagine that you have this supplier you are working with, and the supplier send you an invoice. You basically stop that invoice in the middle. So the one that receiving the invoice, he doesn't get it. He get an invoice where you just manipulated the account number. And that is what is happening with this. So basically they redirect the payments to the criminals' accounts, and then they steal the money. And I have analyzed more than 500 of those cases, and I can tell you, last year FBI reported that they have seen a total loss of $25 million or billion dollars. So it's something extremely critical for this society. So looking at this slide, what you can see an explosion in Office 365 phishing. They again are using the COVID-19 theme. So I just have a couple of examples, which I don't want to go into details with, but as you can see in all of them, what comes up is that something with COVID-19 or coronavirus update. And they are very tricky, these kind of attacks, because they are pre-filling your username. The email is or the URL that you get to look precisely as it should, and they are actually redirecting you to the real site after they stole your username and password. So you don't realize that you were on a phishing site unless that you understand it and you are very aware when you do the login. So be aware of the Office 365 phishing, which is something that Microsoft is really, really annoyed around because it gives them a really bad reputation. Then to something completely different, and this is related to TikTok, and I thought that you guys might know TikTok. It is actually not COVID-19 specifically related, but it was during COVID-19 that people realized that you could kind of make fake videos in a stream because they didn't receive the content from HTTPS, but only from HTTP. So you could basically inject. And what they show in this video is how they are injecting a COVID-19 fake video. And make it look like someone you trust is publishing a video, and then they are changing the content. Not that interesting, but I just thought that TikTok was interesting. At least my son, he was very, very keen to understand what this attack was about. We also see that they are using the compensation model from the government. So, and this is in Canada, where the Prime Minister, he's sending out an email that telling people to get a check of 2,500 Canadian dollars for staying home during the coronavirus. And who won't do that? That was something everybody would like, I think. So in this specific case, you would be infected with the set loader, which is not only a rat, it's also a banker Trojan. And the difference between a rat and a banker Trojan is that the banker Trojan is able to circumvent the two-factor authentication with your bank, typical. So they steal your credit card and get access to your bank account and transfer money from it, where rats basically just give access to your machine. Then some of the mobile apps that we have seen, they are in different categories. One of them being ransomware. So that would encrypt your mobile phone and ask for a ransom. Another one is a banker Trojan, and that would give access to or intercept your SMSs for two-factor authentication validation and also inject malicious transactions to your mobile banking app, and phishing. One of the most dangerous one that I'm very, very scared about is the Cerberus banker Trojan, which is able to circumvent two-factor authentication not only from SMSs but also from the two-factor applications that is being used more and more. So LastPass or Google Authenticator or whatever you see out there is able to kind of steal that token from it. It's still only or dominant on Android that we see the attack is happening, and that is of course due to the strict policy from Apple. It's not because their software is more secure, it's simply just because they are much more shut down in terms of what the user is allowed to do. But it's not because they're writing better code. We do see state-sponsored attack, and this one is something reported from US, where FBI says that hackers have broken into the US coronavirus research that they claim. If that's true or not, we really don't know, but it was at least something that was published during the coronavirus time. And basically it looks like it is legit and that somebody did it. And I'm guessing there's a lot of things around the research of COVID-19 in Denmark. I know we have been able to do a what's it called, like something that can see if you have been infected with corona, not if you are infected, but if you have been infected. And that research is something that is really worth a lot of money, and somewhat from the States would like to know about. So I guess it's something that you would expect. We see FBI is warning about these BC attacks that is also increasing because a lot of people is working from home, and they sometimes we've seen attacks where they are using the theme that, hey, I'm working from home, but I don't have access to my corporate email, so please supplier use my private email, and then they are triggering and manipulating the invoices that goes into the company afterwards. This one is about compensation, and especially because of panic that has happened in hospitals and other places where they really need to buy some of the stuff needed for cleaning your hands or whatever is needed. There has been a panic going on at hospitals in the procurement departments, basically to get these goods shipped. We have seen attacks against the energy and the government, and a new rat written in Python that is targeting SCADA systems. But again, the email that is distributing this rat is again a COVID-19 theme email being sent out, which is something with Visual Basic starting up as a macro, and then you get infected with this rat, and there you go. We've also seen a lot of fake shops, and the fake shops is something that have popped up. Of course, during COVID-19, the fake shop is nothing new. A little fun story related to some of the fake shops before the COVID-19. I was doing an interview with a journalist who said, like, how easy is it to buy credit cards on the Darknet? And I said, well, it's pretty easy. You of course need to find out what shop is out there. Probably you want to go through a Tor browser and then find the shops, and you log in, and you basically just buy the credit cards. And he said, well, I want to try that. I said, well, go ahead. And he went home, and he called me, and he said, yeah, and I went into one of these web shops, and I tried to buy a credit card, but what happened was that the credit card that I was buying with got misused right after I bought, and I never got my credit card that I was trying to buy. So I told him, so you went into a website that is selling stolen credit cards, and you paid with your credit card. I mean, how stupid can you be? So he said, wow, maybe you should help me. So I helped him, and obviously we were not using a credit card to buy those credit cards. We were using some other measures. And then he got the car. But that means that fake web shops have been around for a while. These web shops you're seeing here are web shops that is claiming you can buy like tests for corona and so on. So at least 2,000 online corona virus web shop was detected in 1 month from just in UK, claiming to selling COVID-19 stuff. Some of the last thing I have is in respect to the ransomware, and just to be clear, like the two most active threats out there currently, at least seen from our perspective, is the targeted ransomware attacks, and it's the BEC attacks. They're causing most losses to companies. I'm not saying it's the biggest threat for everyone, but just saying that that is where the money is lost. And that is a big risk for normal companies. The targeted ransomware attack has actually some of the groups out there, and there are a lot of groups out there. They have a moral compass following, so they are not targeting the healthcare in this COVID-19. So they're basically making commercial for themselves by, hey, we don't target the healthcare section due to COVID-19. This one is the cloak ransomware. But on the other hand, you have the threat actor behind Reich, which is actually the group called TrickBot that is using that component, and they are basically continue targeting medical facilities despite of the epidemic. Speaking about Reich, I will have my last slide on the cyber threat highlights, and that is related to the Trojans and the group behind TrickBot. TrickBot is the most largest botnet info stealer that we have seen active for a while, and it's really being used heavily. It's a business that has been usually targeting the financial sector, and that's why we have been following it in so long time, where we're able to do the bypass of two-factor authentication with banks and stealing credit cards. Now it is more a more generic Trojan, which has a lot of different modules. One of them being a ransomware module, which is Reich. So whenever they get into a company and they don't find any financial interesting accounts that they can focus on, they will drop their ransomware component in the network and thereby make extortion. Usually they were buying access to these networks from another criminal group called Emotet. Basically Emotet is specialized into just making the first infection be on the computer, on the network, and then putting the infected computers for sale, and TrickBot would buy them. Now we have seen in the COVID-19 that TrickBot have found out that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's pretty easy to get people infected because the theme in their emails is very relevant. So they have basically exploded their own attacks. So we have seen an increase in spear phishing emails from TrickBot again, which we usually don't see. And that was the end of the kind of COVID-19 attacks we have seen. There is, of course, a lot of other attacks, but I was trying to take out the most interesting ones. And just to be completely honest about it's not because there are new attacks, it's simply because the attack increased, which I said in the beginning. So it's still ransomware, it's still business email compromise we are seeing, it's still, of course, state-sponsored and espionage, but nothing kind of new that has arisen. So one of the attacks and one of the cases that I want to give you insight into is an ongoing, still a little ongoing, meaning that we are still in the phase of finding the criminal who is behind the attack. But I want to share it because it's something that was using the COVID-19 pandemic to get in to this company. And I want to walk you through it in the same way as I was participating on this incident, to give you kind of an insight into how stressful it can be to be sitting as a CIO within a company that get hit by a ransomware attack. What kind of mechanism that is being brought up during such an attack, and what kind of things you can do and you should do during an incident response case like this. So the very first thing happening was that the CIO in this enterprise that was doing logistic and transportation, typical attacks like this takes place when it's out of office. So this was Sunday morning at 4 o'clock that the whole attack started, and not before 10 o'clock people start realizing that something was wrong. And around 11 o'clock, the head of operation, he called the CIO and told him something is really, really wrong. We have 160 servers, virtual servers, that are down, and we cannot start them. It seems like the disks are corrupted. We already looked at the backup system, and somebody wiped that totally, so we cannot connect to it. We realized on our VM or on our virtual environment that one of our service accounts, which has domain administrator privileges, was being used to shut down virtual servers. And we have about 500 virtual servers, but they only got 260 shut down before we disabled that account, and that stopped the process for the rest being shut down. And then we found out that in our virtual environments, somebody have installed, set up 10 Ubuntu Linux servers. They all are named something about restore underscore and then a number. And nobody knows about those machines. But it seems like they have mounted in total 600 virtual disks from those 160 virtual servers that have been shut down. And the reason why there are 10 is because there is a limitation on how many disks one Ubuntu server can mount. Don't panic, I said. This is something we need to look into. But of course, when we arrived to this incident, one of the things we realized was they had not shut down the internet connection. So we really told them you need to get that shut down immediately. And they had like breakout points in all over the world, so they needed to shut down that as well. So we were sure that the criminal did not have access to the network anymore. These kind of cases is extremely stressful for everyone. So it's important that you have some kind of knowledge and you know how to track it. But typical when you have an incident like this, you will start up different tracks and you run them in parallel to ensure that you are moving forward on different tracks. And some of the tracks might have different sub-tracks, so you're not getting lost in one direction. So in this specific case, and we do that normally, we start up a track regarding, and I can tell you the next track, regarding like what is the damage, and of course prevent it from further damaging, and find out how much have been damaged. And the way to do that is basically we knew that if they were shutting down 160 servers, and they wanted to have access still to the company, which they often want to have for a while until we have found them. It had to be one of the machines that they hadn't shut down that would still have a backdoor. So we basically just started to analyze, and we have a special tool for that can collect information very fastly from any machine that is in the network. And we realized pretty fast that one of the servers in the DMZ had a Tor service installed 2 weeks prior the shutdown. And when we looked at that, we could see that it wasn't just a normal Tor service. It was Tor service that would do a remote or a reverse connection out of the network. So if that specific server could go on the internet, they were using Tor to connect to a predefined list of IPs and publish an RDP service that would do port forwarding to the local host on RDP on that server. So basically what you're seeing there is you can use a RDP connection with a Tor onion link, and that is what you see on the right hand side. That is the shops out there that's actually selling access in there for RDP over the Tor network. We also realized that we couldn't really find ransomware nodes anywhere in the environment. Typical, there will be ransomware nodes on all the servers, but it's also typical the files and not the disks that are encrypted. So that might explain that. But then again, they had found out that they had domain administrator privileges, and then still they chose to kind of remount disks and do stuff. So there's a lot of different things that put us in a direction that this might not be related to ransomware. This might be related to sabotage or a competitor that is trying to destroy them. So at this stage, it was really a different case than what we used to see. The other track we start on parallel is like to get back on track. And in this case, it showed that the backup system that was sent to the manufacturer, it was not possible for them to fix. They wanted to try out some last thing, but very unlikely to succeed. And that would take at least 5 days and cost $1 million Danish. But we still had to tell them to try it, because if they couldn't get back online and they had no backup servers, then basically had to go bankrupt. And then this was also where we found out that they had overwritten not the entire disk. They only overwritten the first 240 megabyte of each disk. And that was interesting because that might allow us to recover some of the data. Obviously, the first 240 megabyte of the disk is really critical because it's a master boot record and the master file table sometimes and so on. But one of the things we realized in this phase was that actually Microsoft, they have a default partition, a recovery partition that is bigger than 240 megabytes. So it was mostly the master boot record and the recovery partition that was destroyed. I mean, it wasn't easy to recover it, but we said, well, let's put some of our best people on forensics on this case to see if they can make something that will allow us to kind of bypass the recovery partition, then point directly to the operating system and the data files. And after some work, a day work, we with a hex editor and a lot of Red Bulls, we were able to kind of recover those servers one by one by using hex editor. Unfortunately, all the 2008 and 2003 servers were only having 100 megabyte in the recovery partition, so they were just a waste of time, but they had to be changed anyways. So so actually, we were able to recover everything from this case by, I would say, by pure luck. If it was criminals that knew what they were doing entirely, they would have encrypted more than the first 240 megabyte. They were using DD. Basically, they were using DD and then with their random data. And then they had taken a copy of the first 240 megabyte and kept that as the key, and then just overwritten with their random stuff on the first 240 megabyte. One of the other tracks is finding patient zero, because the worst thing that can happen if you get this one sorted out and you put them on again, and then you realize that they were using an exploit on your web server that you didn't cover. So you really want to know how they got in. And that took us a little time because they had no centralized locking. There was nothing there that could help us. But we found out that they had EDR on some of the machines, and even though it had blocked anything from the attack, it was still monitoring some of the activities and storing that in the cloud. And one of the things we found was a program called procdump64.exe, which is a program from sysinternals, a legit tool, by the way, but it will dump the part of the memory that contains clear text passwords from the system. And criminals are using that very often because it's not being detected by the AV, and it gives them whatever they need to kind of get more privileges. So when we found out that that had run on a server 3 months before the attack, we found out on which servers it had run first on, and that gave us basically the patient zero machine, and we realized that they had, due to COVID-19, people working from home and needed instant access, and the VPN was not able to follow the demand. So they put up a new server with RDP directly on the internet, and the criminal, they basically brute forced it with a known password list from other leaks, and they compromised one of the accounts. That was a local administrator account, and from there on, they escalated the privileges to domain administrator, and then, yeah, you know the rest of the story. Speaking there about who was behind the attack, that is very often difficult to say. But one of the things when you start in dialogue with the criminal, you realize what language they speak. You realize a lot of other things, what time zone they're in, if they created an email account for the purpose. And they used 2 email addresses in this attack. They demanded 200 bitcoins. That is in Danish 12 million. In euro, it's probably 1.4, I think. And if you paid within the first 3 days, you would get it half price. But one of the things we realized was that they were using their internal, or they were copying in their toolbox that was containing different things. First of all, the Tor backdoor, some Firefox portable browsers, so they could avoid any kind of traces, and the procdump tool, and some other tools. They also had Mimikat, if you know that, that's the same, that is able to kind of take out the passwords from the procdump data. And the thing was that we basically asked the criminal also to give us proof that they could decrypt the data. And one of the things there was that we found out that these guys were not that experienced, because they had used the same password for the Ubuntu servers. So they couldn't just give us one of the passwords and let us see that some of the servers could be encrypted. No, if they gave us that password, we basically had access to everything. And when we said to them, well, how do we do it then? They didn't know, but then they came back with a solution that we should ship them one of the Ubuntu servers. They would then reset the password and send it back to us. A really big mess, but showing that these guys were not used to do it, which also pointed back to that they might be sabotage instead of a ransomware attack. Because one of the other things was that it took them literally 5 days to answer the email that we sent to them, with the excuse that it had gone into the spam filter. And during those 5 days, we were able to restore stuff ourselves. So the only reason for getting in contact with them was to basically get some more information about who they might were. I cannot reveal more from now, but something interesting came up that we hopefully will be able to follow going forward. But then you always want to start up a GDPR-related track if some data have been compromised that you need to report different places. That specific track is something we typically do not participate in, but we assist with what was stolen. So one of the things was that from the Tor backdoors, everything uploaded from Tor and downloaded was reported in the log. So we knew that they had uploaded 4 GB of data from the network. We just couldn't see what it was. So we do assist with some stuff, but not more than that. So that was the information about a incident response attack taking place during the COVID-19 and using some of the risks that COVID-19 have introduced. In this specific case, it was the RDP directly on the internet. The last thing I have is some of the contribution we have done, and I haven't really thought about how we can do it with you, because I think you are a pretty big society. But what I will do is reach out to the people arranging this presentation and give you access in some way. Basically, what we have done is we have said that during the pandemic, we basically give away free access to our threat intel and our threat intelligence reports, where you can read about all the things that I have showed you. What are the new trends? What kind of APT attacks do we see? What have we learned, and so on. Deep insight into infection statistics and new fileless injections methods and so on. But it also gives you access to the threat intel that I was trying to highlight in the different places. For your purposes, it's purely research. It's not something we allow you to use. We cannot control it, but we say if it's for students and people working working on universities so on, they get a research license, and they can basically use it ad hoc to research and enrich like things that they are looking into. So it could be finding patterns between APT groups. So if you have one indicator here, you can see how it relates to other groups and so on. You get access to the portal, but there's also APIs you can use to extract stuff. One of the things that we are currently just added in is a list of companies that get infected with ransomware. There are 10 groups, around 10 groups out there, which now have started not only to encrypt the machines, but also steal the sensitive data from the systems. And what they are doing with that data is they are basically publishing it on official websites just to put pressure on the company to do payments. And in this specific, what you see on this screen is basically companies that has been published and what ransomware they have been infected with. And then you know that data from these companies is being leaked. And if that is one of your suppliers, you want to be sure that it's not information that have been leaked about you. We also have Maltego. I don't want to use so much time on that, but you can get access. If you know Maltego, we have 15 different transforms with access to the same data. So you can use the virtualization tool to work with our threat intel. And that leaves us with some questions. Yeah, that was my last slide. So I want to start thanking you all for listening in, and I will open up for questions. Thank you. I don't know if the moderator is taking over or something, but I have the chat. If you want to do some questions, you can write it in the chat. But other than that, I'm waiting for questions to come in. If not, then I'm guessing that we can maybe just shut down the session. Totally up to you, but I will leave this open for the next 5 minutes, and then okay, I got one question. What will be the general strategy to protect data? Maybe there is no general one, some advice. Yes, okay, so from a backup perspective, the reason why the criminal were able to destroy the backup system was that it was on the same Active Directory as everything else. So with those privileges they got, they could access and destroy the backup system. So one of the advices we always give is like use a shadow domain or a completely different access scheme where you can only send data to that backup server. You cannot go in and delete it. So regardless of what credentials they have, there's no way to destroy it. How long the threat may, what is that? How long the threat may be lasting? I'm not sure about that question. So maybe, but I would say that the ransomware and the BC is something that we will see increase and double up in losses in the next year as well. It has doubled up from the BC flow perspective. It has doubled up the last 5 years. $24 billion last year, expected to be $48 billion in 2020. So it's definitely not something to go away, and neither does the ransomware attacks.
Okay, sure.
Hello? Should I read up a new question? Am I? Yeah, it says, what can be the post strategy, for example, if I click something, then what will be the best thing to do? So if you have, if you fall into one of these spear phishing emails and you clicked a Word document and you ran the macro, for example, and you got infected, well, the best thing to do is to kind of take out your internet connection to begin with, and if it's ransomware related, you can also just shut down the machine. So it very much depends on what kind of attack it is, and sometimes you don't know that. In general, I would say if you get infected and you don't know how to do forensics, then you should reinstall your machine, because there's so many things that could have happened to that machine. If you are able to do forensics and investigate it, you can clean it up yourself. We work a lot with banks where we actually have a service that is analyzing these machines and give advices on how you can clean it without the reinstallation. But then you need to contact your bank, and sometimes that will allow you to use our services. But yeah, there are so many tricks they're using to hide themselves with backdoors on machines. I mean, if I should give advices to a kind of a user, the advices is that emails is the most dominant way in. So emails is something you want to really be concerned about, open up, and be very, very, very kind of thinking about what kind of files you're clicking on and what links you're clicking on. And whenever you are getting an email and you are leaded into a login page, you shouldn't never log in, because you don't get an email like that often. But from a company perspective, I also heard you said that with firewalls and so on. I mean, firewalls and antivirus and all that is the old days. It's so easy to bypass. Today, it's all about you need to be able to monitor and log what is happening in your network and be able to act 24/7. Unfortunately, not everyone can do that, but that is the best advice. You need every incident we have been at. There has always been an indicator somewhere in the network that would have, if somebody actually looked at it and knew what they were doing, would have been able to spot before 3 months after, and they planned the attack and carried it out. They should have been discovered by then. So, yeah, monitoring 24/7. Thank you all for listening in, and happy to do it again sometime. Pleasure is mine.